I think we're just collateral damage because if you look at the US beef industry, they're the largest in the world.
A staggering $5 billion in canceled orders. That's the devastating blow American ranchers experienced when Asian ports began rejecting entire shipments of US beef and pork, sending them back across the Pacific. During that exact same period, Canadian meat producers secured contracts worth nearly identical amounts. Their maple leaf branding suddenly appeared on restaurant menus from Tokyo's upscale Ginza district to Seoul's trendy Gangnam neighborhood. The domestic impact was immediate and severe. Ground beef prices jumped by $1.90 per package. Bacon prices approached $10 per pound. Grocery retailers issued warnings about an additional 15% price increase expected before Labor Day weekend. How did Washington's tariff strategy collapse so dramatically that Canada, rather than Texas, became the primary meat supplier to half the Pacific region? What implications does this shift hold for American consumers planning their next barbecue? Tonight, we examine every rejected shipment, uncover the hidden bottlenecks disrupting supply chains, and demonstrate how a single policy decision could devastate a $200 billion agricultural sector. Stay with us because our final analysis might completely change your grocery shopping strategy. Does America still control what appears on its own dinner tables? The transformation started on March 27, 2023, when Tokyo quietly lifted a 20-year restriction on Canadian processed beef, opening a $518 million Canadian dollar pathway to Asia's most affluent consumers. 2 years afterward, Statistics Canada recorded a 13.1% increase in meat exports to Japan during May 2025, confirming that the pathway had become a continuous supply line. Tokyo's policy reversal dominated Asian business publications, and Stewart houses from Osaka to Okinawa replaced U.S. prime advertising with maple leaf marketing materials overnight. This supply line operates on turbulence occurring south of the 49th parallel. During April, Beijing's tariff offensive imposed an additional 125% tax on U.S. beef, compelling major barbecue restaurant chains in the Chinese capital to replace Texas brisket with cheaper Canadian alternatives. Shipping containers previously labeled Nebraska Choice now return home partially filled, while Asian cold storage facilities overflow with red and white packaging. Industry representatives caution that if Beijing allows hundreds of U.S. plant certifications to expire this summer, the backlog will develop into a comprehensive supply emergency. Upstream, Manitoba livestock and cattle producers already consider the United States an unreliable customer, negotiating fresh agreements with Korean and Filipino importers before Washington's next tariff attack arrives. Reuters reports some farms are installing on-location refrigeration systems so international buyers can collect products directly in Winnipeg, bypass border crossings, and avoid all pending charges. If this alternative becomes standard practice, American supermarkets might soon purchase through Canadian intermediaries for meat that previously came directly from Iowa, evidence that a single policy document can reorganize who supplies the Pacific region. On March 5, 2025, the U.S. Meat Export Federation documented that pork exports consumed 100.7 million bushels of domestic soybeans during 2024, contributing $1.12 billion to farm revenues. The identical study revealed meat shipments added 59 cents to every bushel of corn sold last year. Those additional payments kept numerous Midwest producers profitable during challenges, ending seasons of drought and elevated fuel expenses. However, this financial buffer is already shrinking, since Beijing indicated on March 14, 2025, that export permits for nearly 1,000 U.S. meat processing facilities could lapse. Asian purchasers have rushed toward Canadian suppliers, concerned about sudden port rejections. The competition is intense. Chicago commodity traders estimate that if even half those Chinese contracts vanish, soybean demand could decline by approximately 50 million bushels, sufficient to eliminate the entire price advantage gained during 2024. Corn markets would experience the next disruption. A loss of 59 cents may appear modest, yet it removes nearly $3 billion from the 2025 harvest value at current planting estimates. This calculation triggers alarm signals across Iowa cooperatives already confronting restricted credit access. Meanwhile, Manitoba ranchers receive advance contracts paying in Canadian currency and guaranteeing space on Asia-bound vessels, agreements U.S. feeding operations previously assumed were guaranteed. If this transition solidifies before autumn's first freeze, American grain elevators could begin October with excess soy and corn supplies they cannot distribute, triggering emergency sales reminiscent of the 2018 tariff crisis. Producers describe it as the second impact following the supply chain devastation, all stemming from meat shipments rejected at international ports. Simply stated, a policy designed to penalize competitors is rebounding through the grain systems that support U.S. livestock operations, threatening to convert a previously dependable export advantage into an unwanted surplus. 3 specific dates mark this decline. On March 27, 2025, USDA export records indicated only 54 metric tons of U.S. beef scheduled for China. This number represented a decrease from over 2,000 tons weekly just 1 month prior. Beijing had permitted hundreds of American facility licenses to expire immediately. This 97% reduction shocked Midwestern processing companies. The communication was direct: locate alternative buyers or cease operations. Most were unable to comply. Backlogs extended freezing facilities beyond their limits. Refrigerated supply chains halted, storage fees accumulated, and supervisors began canceling processing shifts to minimize losses. Domestic consumers experienced the consequences faster than any financial analysis could predict. By February 28, 2025, average ground beef costs in American cities had increased 43% compared with early 2020. Families spending $8 on taco ingredients 5 years ago now pay nearly $12. Price increases spread most rapidly in lower-income areas, precisely where pork and beef previously maximized limited household budgets. School meal programs are modifying menus, substituting beef with less expensive chicken alternatives. Supply cannot address the shortage because the national cattle population remains at a 74-year minimum following drought-induced reductions. Feedlots operate with minimal inventory, replacement animals are limited, and even Tyson Foods acknowledges significant losses while waiting for ranchers to rebuild herds, a process requiring 2 breeding seasons rather than 2 business quarters. Canada interprets these statistics as strategic opportunities. Every ton China refuses represents an invitation north of the 49th parallel. Manitoba processors schedule extended shifts. Saskatchewan rail facilities accumulate refrigerated containers, and Japanese importers pay premiums to secure next season's allocations before Washington reconsiders. The longer U.S. licenses remain uncertain, the simpler it becomes for the Maple Leaf to establish permanent connections with Asian dining establishments. If Beijing officials renew their restrictions in July, analysts predict the United States could forfeit another $1 billion in beef contracts by year's end, securing a trade pathway that tariffs alone cannot restore. The export collapse we examined earlier now impacts everyday consumer spending. During its May 5, 2025 investor presentation, Tyson Foods disclosed an 8.2% increase in average beef prices for the second quarter. This announcement sent shoppers toward cheaper chicken options and reduced stock values by 9% in one trading session. This represents the actual expense that supermarkets must absorb or transfer directly to consumers. Evidence of this pressure materialized quickly. Tyson Foods executives admitted that rising cattle expenses are compressing profit margins. Shoppers simultaneously shift toward lower-cost chicken, creating additional stress on the company's recovery strategy. Tyson's chief executive described the market as the most challenging ever encountered, a statement Wall Street continues to remember. Why such severity? Reuters indicates the U.S. cattle herd has contracted to its smallest level since 1951, forcing feedlots to compete aggressively for every available animal. This competitive bidding already influences consumer price measurements. Wholesale beef increased 10.1% compared with the previous May, representing the largest increase among essential proteins. Fast food establishments from Dallas to Detroit reduce patty sizes, while family grocery stores print updated price labels almost weekly. School districts substitute taco beef with chicken because budget administrators cannot match invoices that rise fast. Than federal reimbursements. Meanwhile, diners in Tokyo and Seoul consume steaks marked Canada Prime, securing supply that previously shipped from Seattle ports. Every pound Canada exports north of the 49th parallel deepens shortages on U.S. store shelves. Analysts warned that if drought continues and tariffs persist, fourth-quarter roasts could become luxury purchases rather than holiday traditions. Stated directly, Washington's trade experiment now functions as a grocery store tax, and costs continue accumulating. The grocery store difficulties we documented represent only initial symptoms. While American officials discuss tariffs, Ottawa already advances with strategies that restructure continental meat commerce. In its February 28, 2025 update, Reuters informed investors that 75% of Canadian beef typically travels south into the United States. Yet ranchers throughout the prairies reduce herd sizes instead of expanding, disturbed by Washington's continuing threats of 25% border taxes. This withdrawal is intentional. Producers state they will not invest money in young cattle that could be excluded from their primary market immediately. Ottawa addressed this gap on March 7, 2025, implementing a 6.5 billion Canadian relief program, including 1 billion Canadian dollars designated for cold storage centers and refrigerated rail systems, so processors can redirect steaks directly to Asia without crossing U.S. territory. Government-subsidized steel and extended freezer cars already queue in Saskatchewan rail yards, providing Japanese importers door-to-door service that never crosses the 49th parallel. Washington's response involves severe budget reductions. Tyson Foods announced on December 2, 2024, it would close a beef and pork facility in Emporia, Cal. NSAs, eliminating over 800 positions. This latest indication that demand shortfalls force processors from 3 daily shifts to 1 or none. Industry leaders suggest privately that if China maintains the current license suspension past August, at least 4 additional Midwest production lines could cease operations before Thanksgiving. This possibility has Iowa feedlots rejecting new cattle and Minnesota grain elevators seeking international buyers to clear approaching grain surpluses. The difference is obvious. Canada subsidizes distribution systems to capture rejected U.S. contracts, while America closes slaughterhouse facilities, hoping tariffs will somehow reverse trade patterns. Unless policy changes rapidly, the maple leaf will control Pacific region protein markets, and U.S. ranchers may discover their finest cattle excluded from both international and domestic auctions. Imagine this scenario. Christmas decorations illuminate stores and meat departments no longer display any products bearing USA labels. This isn't speculation, but the direction we have documented. Canada captured Asia by responding quickly, constructing larger freezers, and establishing red and white branding the region now relies upon. Meanwhile, Washington created bureaucratic complications, allowed cold storage infrastructure to deteriorate, and fired tariff weapons directly at its own interests. If Capitol Hill cannot restore logistics networks and coordinate safety regulations before the next purchasing period, America's $200 billion protein industry could witness a century of market leadership dissolve within 1 fiscal year. However, one possibility remains: a North American-Asian standards agreement that eliminates paperwork conflicts and moves meat at Canadian efficiency levels. Will the Stars and Stripes reclaim your Friday night steak, or does the maple leaf continue controlling the market? Share your predictions below. Your response might influence next week's analysis.